The store had a name once, Riverton Foods, the sign still bolted above the doors, most of the letters intact. But no one called it that now. People called it the Vault, because that's what it had become. A fortress of chain link and rebar, its windows filled with cinder block. 3 men on the roof with rifles and older grievances than the world could account for. Sam stood at the checkout counter that wasn't a checkout counter anymore. It was a scale. Everything you took out had to be weighed, logged, priced against whatever the Vault decided you'd brought in to trade. He'd brought copper wire, 6 batteries, a hand-crank radio that still worked. It bought him rice, 2 cans of beans, a bag of dried apples going soft at the edges, and a bottle of children's aspirin that cost him more than everything else combined.
Prices went up on the aspirin, supplies low, demands not going anywhere.
It's for my daughter.
It's for everyone's daughter, Sam. That's the trouble.
Cobb didn't look up from the ledger. He had a way of writing that made the numbers look like they mattered more than the people attached to them.
You still owe me from March.
I paid you back in March.
You paid me back what you had in March. That's not the same as what you owed.
Sam let it go. He always let it go, and Cobb always brought it up, and neither of them said the actual thing, which was that Cobb's wife had died in the house fire the week Sam had promised to bring water and hadn't, because a distortion had opened up 2 streets over and swallowed the delivery cart and mule, and 40 minutes of Sam's life he still didn't have an explanation for. He'd told Cobb the truth. Cobb had nodded like a man accepting a verdict he didn't believe in. It had sat between them ever since, unaddressed, filed away the way the Vault filed everything, logged, priced, never resolved.
Watch the Ashford stretch. Fold opened up there yesterday. Boys on the roof saw it swallow half a delivery truck this morning. Didn't spit it back.
How big?
Big enough. Don't cut through the lot behind the church. Go around.
It was the kind of information the Vault gave for free because a dead customer was a customer lost twice. Once to the fold, once to the ledger that would never get squared. Sam had learned to read that particular arithmetic. Everyone had, eventually. You learned the shape of the system by the places it let you live. Outside, the light had gone that flat, scoured white it got in the afternoons now, the sky doing something to itself that had no name yet, though people had tried a dozen. Static sky, bruise light. His daughter, when she was smaller, had called it the sky that forgot, and no one had corrected her because it seemed as accurate as anything else. He walked. The road out of the Vault's lot had been repaved once, badly, the tar still holding the ghost print of tires from trucks that didn't exist anymore. He kept to the crown of it, away from the ditches, because low ground pooled things, not water, not anymore, but the other kind of pooling, places where the wrongness settled like silt. He'd learned that the first winter. He hadn't learned it in a book. He'd learned it watching a neighbor's dog trot into a ditch and come out on the other side of the street already, 30 feet displaced, blinking, before its legs folded the wrong direction and it stopped being a dog shape at all. He thought of Elena's hands. Strange thing to think of, walking a dead road with a pack of beans and aspirin. But that's where his mind went. Her hands, the specific chapped knuckle of her left thumb, the way she held Mira's foot when she checked it for fever. He thought of these things because thinking of the road too long made the road bigger than it was. That was its trick. The distortions fed on attention the way fire fed on air. Look at them straight and long enough, and they found a way to be more real than they'd started. Ashford Street came up on his left, the church steeple crooked at the far end of it like a compass needle stuck between 2 wrong norths. He didn't go down it. He kept to Cobb's advice and swung wide around the block, past the burned-out laundromat, past a fence someone had hung with wind chimes made of spoons. A warning system, the good kind, the kind you built from what you had left. The spoons were still, not swaying, not even slightly, though the air moved enough to lift dust off the curb 3 feet away. Sam stopped walking. He watched the spoons for a long 10 seconds, the pack suddenly heavy on his shoulders, the aspirin bottle a small hard weight against his hip, like a second pulse. Behind the fence, the laundromat's shadow lay wrong on the ground. Too long, pointing the wrong way for the hour, pointing toward him like something had measured the angle on purpose. He took a slow step back, then another. Home was 4 miles out. He had, by his best guess, about 90 minutes of light left to make it in. The route around the block added maybe 8 minutes. Sam did the math without meaning to. It was reflex now, the way people used to check phones. 8 minutes was nothing against 90, except that 90 wasn't real time anymore. It was borrowed time, and borrowed time compounded interest in ways the old economy never had. He kept his eyes down and to the side as he passed the fence, watching the spoons in his periphery the way Cobb had taught him to watch anything that mattered. Never head on, Cobb had said that first week, standing on the vault's loading dock with a rifle he didn't need to be holding. You look at a thing straight, you're feeding it. Give it your whole attention and it takes it. Learned that from a hole in the parking lot that used to be a Buick. Sam hadn't understood the shape of it then. He understood it now, walking with his shoulder half turned, feeling the spoons hang dead in a wind that moved everything else on the street. A plastic bag skating along the gutter, a torn tarp snapping against a porch rail 3 houses down. Everything moved except the spoons and the shadow. The shadow he didn't look at again at all. A rat came out from under the laundromat's collapsed awning, low and fast, angling across the sidewalk toward the fence line. Sam's whole body went still, not from fear of the rat, but from what came after. The rat crossed some line he couldn't see, some threshold with no paint on it, and it didn't stop being a rat so much as it stopped being anywhere at all. No sound, no flare of light, no ripple, nothing you could put in a report if there'd been anyone left to report to. It was there, and then the space where it had been was just space, indifferent, already forgetting the rat had used it. Sam did not stop walking. Stopping was its own kind of attention. He kept his pace even and his eyes forward and let the fence and the wrong shadow fall behind him, and only once he'd put 2 blocks between himself and that stretch of sidewalk did he let his hands unclench. He thought of Cobb's face when he'd said no delivery this week. Prices are what they are, take it or leave the shelf for someone who will. 3 months since the fire. Sam had been on the schedule that day. Water, 6 jugs, a standing order Cobb had never taken off the books even after. Sam hadn't made it. A fold had opened on Miller Street an hour before his walk, wide and slow and swallowing half a fence and a mailbox, and by the time it closed enough to trust, curfew had him boxed in at the Hendersons' place 3 streets over. He'd told himself it wasn't his fault. He still told himself that. Cobb had never once said otherwise, out loud. That was the trouble with it. If Cobb had said it, Sam could have argued it. Instead, there was just the way Cobb's eyes moved past him a half-second too fast every time Sam came through the gate. The way the pricing on aspirin had a hard, deliberate edge to it that Sam suspected wasn't about scarcity at all. Debts got logged in that place, not all of them on paper. The road opened into a wider stretch, houses set back with dead lawns gone to seed, and here at least the ground was even and the light hadn't started its long slide yet. Sam allowed himself to think of Mira for a stretch. Not the fever, not yet. He wasn't ready to let his mind all the way into that room. But the sound of her laugh from before, high and surprised, like she hadn't expected herself to make it. He held that instead of the other thing. He was getting good at choosing which rooms to walk into, in his head. It was its own kind of survival skill, maybe the first one, before you learned to read a shadow or hear a spoon go silent. The street forked. He knew this fork. Left went the shorter way, past the old elementary school. Right added 20 minutes, but kept him on high ground the whole way. No ditches, no low pooling places to skirt. 20 minutes was a fortune and a pittance both, depending which clock you used. He stood at the fork longer than he should have, given the light. Overhead, the sky had that flat, scoured look it got in the last hour before dusk. Not quite the color sky should be, like something had washed the blue out and forgotten to put all of it back. He thought about Eleanor's hands again, not summoned this time, just arriving, the way certain thoughts didn't ask permission anymore. He thought about how she used to stand at this exact fork, years before any of it, deciding between the bakery and the shortcut, and how it had never once mattered which way she picked. It mattered now. Everything picked a way that mattered now. He went right. The higher ground kept its promise for the first 10 minutes. Sam walked the ridge of what had been a bike path, weeds through the asphalt in long cracks, and from up here he could see most of the neighborhood laid out below him, roofs and dead trees, and the flat grey smear of the reservoir past that. No ditches, no pooling places. Cobb had taught him to read a landscape like this, The low spots where folds like to settle the way water settles, and up here there was nothing for one to hide in. That was the theory anyway. Cobb had a lot of theories. Sam still owed him for most of them. He kept his eyes soft, the way he'd learned, not looking at any one thing too long. It made walking strange, a kind of permanent squint at the edges of the world, but he'd stopped noticing the strangeness months ago. What he noticed now was how much it had become a personality. He watched everything sideways now, even Mira, even in memory. Some nights he'd catch himself picturing her face from an angle, like even his own mind had learned the trick and wouldn't unlearn it. The path bent down toward Ashford Street, and the ground got soft here, mulched with old leaves nobody had raked in 3 years. He passed the laundromat before he was ready to. He always forgot exactly where it sat until he was on top of it. The collapsed awning slumped over the doorway like something had sat down on it and never gotten up. Glass long gone from the windows, dark inside the way water is dark. No bottom to it that you could see from the street. The fence next to it held the spoons. 6 of them, maybe 7, wired to the chain link at head height, dull metal going dark with weather. Cobb had strung them there. Cobb had strung most of the ones on this route, actually, though he'd never say so, and Sam had never asked. In wind, they should have moved. They didn't move. They hadn't moved in 3 years, hanging dead still in whatever air came through, and that stillness was worth more than any siren. Sam had asked Cobb once what it meant when a spoon that had been still finally moved, and Cobb had looked at him with an expression Sam hadn't been able to read at the time, and said, "You won't need to ask, you'll know." He gave the fence a wide arc anyway, walking with his shoulder half turned, watching the spoons the way you watch a dog you don't trust. Not staring, never staring, just keeping them in the corner where the shape of them would tell him if anything changed. Nothing changed. He let his breath out. It was here, 3 months back, that the whole business with Cobb had actually started, though not on this street. On Miller, 2 blocks over, the day the fold had opened up between Sam and the water crates and swallowed 40 minutes, he never got back. 40 minutes that turned into missing the delivery window entirely. 40 minutes that turned into Cobb's post, catching fire that same afternoon, while Sam was still catching his breath 6 blocks away, sitting on a curb, hands shaking, useless to everyone. Cobb had never said the fire and the fold were connected. Cobb had never said much of anything. But something in him had gone quiet after that, a door shutting, and every transaction since had that same held breath quality, prices a fraction too steep, eyes passing over Sam a half-second too fast. Not cruelty. Worse than that. A ledger being kept. Sam thought, walking, that he understood something now he hadn't understood standing at Cobb's counter that morning. The debt wasn't really about the water. Cobb had lost people in that fire too. Sam didn't know who exactly, hadn't asked, hadn't wanted the answer badly enough to earn the asking. And grief needed somewhere to point itself, and Sam had been standing in the doorway when it went looking. That wasn't fair to say out loud. Sam wasn't going to say it out loud. But it sat in him now, clear in a way it hadn't been an hour ago. The way you could stand close enough to a system for a long time and then one day see the gears of it turn all at once and understand you'd been part of the mechanism the whole time without ever agreeing to it. The fence ended. The spoons fell behind him, small and dark and still. He didn't look back to check them. That was the whole rule, wasn't it? You didn't turn around for a last look at the thing that might be changing behind you. And instead he let his eyes go forward to where Ashford curved and gave way, 2 streets on, to the block he actually lived on. He thought of Mira again, allowed himself the sound of her laugh a second time, rationed it like the last swallow in a bottle. He did not let himself think about her breathing, the particular shallow rasp of it 2 mornings ago, or the aspirin riding in his bag doing nothing yet for anyone. Soon. He was close now, close enough that his feet wanted to go faster than his eyes could safely track the ground. And he made himself slow down, made himself watch the edges of things the way Cobb had taught him. Though Cobb hadn't taught him this part, hadn't taught him what to do with the last mile, the part where all the training in the world couldn't compete with just wanting to be there already. Ashford curved the way it always had, past the shell of the elementary school where the yard equipment stood rusted into shapes nobody used anymore. Sam kept his pace even. He counted his steps sometimes without meaning to, the way he counted minutes, the way everything now got converted into some other currency before he could feel it as itself. At the fork by the school, he slowed without deciding to. Elena used to stand here, in the old life, deciding, bakery or the shortcut past the church, some small daily choice that meant nothing, that she'd made 100 times without once thinking it mattered. He could see her doing it, weight on one foot, then the other. He let himself have that for 3 seconds and then put it down, the way you set down something too hot to hold for long. The spoons on the fence up ahead were still, then one of them wasn't. He caught it in the corner of his eye, the barest tick of motion, metal against wire, and his whole body went cold and correct at once, the training taking over before the fear could. He didn't turn his head. He let his eyes go soft and wide, the way Cobb had taught him on the loading dock a lifetime ago, taking in the fence and the spoons and the lot beyond it all at once, and none of it directly, the way you'd watch a bright light by not watching it. Something moved in the lot. Not the spoons, the ground itself, a patch of it, folding the way water folds when something enters it from underneath, except there was no water and no sound, none at all, and that silence was the worst part, the sheer wrongness of a violence that didn't announce itself. A man was crossing the lot. Sam saw him only in periphery, a shape moving with the loose, hurried gait of someone who didn't know or didn't care what the spoons meant. Sam opened his mouth, some old reflex, some wait, some stop, and then didn't, because Cobb's voice was in him now, permanent as bone. You don't look at it, and you don't call to a man walking into it because your voice makes him turn, and turning is looking, and looking is worse. He said nothing. He kept his eyes soft and forward. There was no light and no sound. There was a man, and then there was the lot, empty, evening light lying flat and yellow across it like nothing had happened at all, because as far as the world was concerned, nothing had. Sam kept walking. His hands were shaking and he let them. That was the cost, he thought. Not doing something cost you nothing you could see, and later you found out anyway, the debt collected quiet as Cobb's ledger, in the shape of a stranger's name you'd never learn and would carry anyway, unlabeled for the rest of your life. He thought of Cobb once more before he let himself stop thinking of Cobb at all. Thought that next time he came through the vault's doors, he would say it. The thing he hadn't said, "I'm sorry about your people," plain as that, and let Cobb do with it what he wanted, the pricing and the coldness and all of it, because carrying a debt honestly was better than carrying it as a thing unspoken between two men who both knew it was there. Then his own street. He didn't run. He wanted to and didn't. Made his feet obey the last 100 yards the way they'd obeyed the last 4 miles, watching the ground, watching the edges, until he was at his own door and there was no more careful way left to be.
Her fever broke an hour ago, started sweating through. She's been asking for you.
Sam knelt and put his hand against his daughter's cheek, damp and cooling, and Mira opened her eyes enough to find him and said his name the way she used to say it before, small and certain, no fear in it at all.
Sam.
He gave her the aspirin anyway, dissolved in water, because rituals mattered even after the danger had passed, and he sat with her on the floor while the light outside went the scoured colour it went before curfew, thin and bruised at the edges, and somewhere behind his ribs a weight he'd been hauling since Miller Street set itself down. Not gone, never gone, but set down enough that he could stand up straight under what was left of it. Eleanor's hands weren't anywhere in the room. He let that be true without flinching from it, the way he'd learned to look at everything now. Sideways, steady, enough to see it clearly without letting it undo him. Outside, the spoons on every fence in the city hung still in wind that moved everything else. Sam sat with what he had in the last hour of light and did not look away from it.